Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Pac-12 adding 4 teams from the Mountain West, a couple of really good teams in there. Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State. All states over there, so it's going to be really interesting to watch that, but got to add a couple more teams. We will keep you updated as they do, because sounds like that's going to happen relatively quickly. But let's get to a little bit of a week 3 wrap-up. There are so many different games that we have not gotten a chance to get to, and want to make sure that we touch on them before Saturday gets around. And I want to start with one that happened actually yesterday. Arizona State edges out Texas State in this one by 3 points. This one was really fun. In the first half, it was back and forth. We had a 21-7 lead in Texas State's direction, and then Arizona State came roaring back. Sam Leavitt played a very pretty first half, tied this game at 21-21 going into halftime, and then really Arizona State's defense took over. They were incredible the rest of this game, outscored Texas State about 24-7, was doing the math really quickly there, throughout the rest of this game, and they did a really good job on the other side of things. They held Cam Scatterbo, the very talented Arizona State running back, 24 carries, 62 yards. He did get in the end zone twice and showed up when they needed it down the stretch, but the reality is, if you're keeping that guy to those type of numbers, you're likely doing your job defensively. So I was really impressed with Texas State. I think they're a team that is going to have plenty to say about that Group of 5 bid into the playoff. Jordan McLeod had 265, 4 touchdowns, and then a not great timing pick at the very end of the game. But overall, I think this is one of those that it just came down to the end of the game, and the Power 5 team had more at their disposal. The game ended with a fumble, an interception, and a turnover on downs for Texas State, so not the way that you wanted to do it, but a huge win for Arizona State, and they have already tied their win total from last year. So huge respect to Kenny Dillingham and getting those boys ready to roll, and now they head into conference play, and they see if they can shock the world by being voted the worst team in this conference to being voted the best. We'll see what happens with them, but obviously a great start and a big-time win in San Marcos yesterday. I wanted to touch on this one very quickly because this is insane. They played 6-minute rolling quarters in the fourth quarter for this one because it got so ugly. But South Alabama only didn't score on one drive in this game, and it was a missed field goal. So it could have been 90-10. But the reality is this was an absolute beatdown, just ridiculous what South Alabama did to them. But one of those things that you see early on in the season every now and then. I feel like Northwestern State has been on the wrong side of this a couple of times this year, but a big-time win for South Alabama, obviously, in their first win of the season. Let's get into Memphis at Florida State. We've talked about this one a little bit throughout the week, but this one's going to get really interesting. Florida State's favored by 6.5 points right now, and the reality is this one needs to be a message sender. There's no other reality where Florida State can live in if they fall in this game, because if they fall in this game, there's so many different things that have to happen around that program that are not going to happen overnight, that are going to take time, like turning more of your attention away from the portal and towards high school recruiting, like overhauling a lot of that roster, especially with some of the defenders that are going to be leaving this offseason. You're going to have a lot to replace in that defensive room, as well as that offense that, frankly, you probably want to replace a lot of that offense. But the reality is there's going to be so many different things that they're going to have to fix. And if you start 0-3, especially with the loss to a G5 team, there's going to be a lot of recruits that are looking elsewhere, and there are already recruits looking elsewhere that we'll talk about here in a second or in a couple of segments. But overall, I think when you look at this game, the quarterback advantage goes to Memphis. Seth Hannigan has been nearly perfect throughout this year, 42 for 60, 469 yards, 3 touchdowns through 2 games, and no INTs, which is the big-time difference between him and DJ. He is not going to put the ball into harm's way. He's going to make the right decision and then just go about the business. He's very comfortable in this offense, and it really does show. And then Mario Anderson, a South Carolina transfer who you might not know about too much, but he was huge for that South Carolina offense down the stretch of last season, and he's a really good player. One of those guys that, frankly, could be playing on Florida State right about now, but decided to go to Memphis, and it's one of those things that if I'm looking at this game objectively from a football perspective, I'm having a hard time leaning towards Florida State, but the reality is they have to win this game, and they have to know that. They have to know that going into this game, the defense is going to have to play lights out. The offense is going to have to pick their moments and have to get somewhat of a run game going. You have to assume Florida State gets this one done, but as of right now, I would not touch this game in terms of betting it, because I would lean in Memphis if I was just using my football brain, but when you bring all of the other stuff into it, I feel like it has to be Florida State. But we'll see what happens. If it's not Florida State, then we're having a very interesting conversation on Monday. I can almost promise you that. But let's get into Cincinnati at Miami of Ohio, because this is going to be a really fun matchup. This is one that could really help the G5 when it comes to playoff implications, because this is a Miami of Ohio team that very much has their eyes set on the MAC title. I think they're the best team in the MAC, although what we saw from Northern Illinois a week ago, I still think Miami of Ohio is the more solid team, and they're coming off a really tough offensive game against Northwestern in week 1, but then they had a little bit of a bye, which was very, very weird this early in the season, but they're going to be fully ready to go. Brett Gabbert is a very solid quarterback in this offense, has done a great job. Yes, Blaine Gabbert's brother, if you're wondering, but a very talented a very talented kid and someone that definitely can make some stuff happen. I think since he is coming off a really devastating loss to Pitt that was just terrible in that fourth quarter. Pitt came back from, I believe, at least 14 down to win that game, and they're just looking for a win. Brendan Sorsby has been all right through a couple of games, but has not been necessarily what they hoped, and they did get Dante Corleone back last week, which is absolutely huge. Great to see him back on the field, one of the best defensive tackles in the entire country. I think I'd lean Cincinnati here, but this one's going to be really close. I think Miami of Ohio has every ability to win this game, and if they do, then we're definitely talking about them in the CFP picture, that's for sure. And then you got Notre Dame heading over to Purdue. This is one of those games that a lot of people have been talking about this one as, okay, Notre Dame can roll in, they can get a quick win, and they can go back to business. I'm not sure that's going to be that easy. I don't think Purdue is all that great of a team necessarily, and I don't necessarily think they're going to compete for the Big Ten, but you look at that offense, it can roll, and they also had a bye last week. They had a week 1 game where Hudson Card had 1 incompletion and 4 touchdowns, and then they got to sit and they got to wait for this game. And it's one of those things that Notre Dame has to go to their house now. So it's one of those places that you would assume Notre Dame could get right. You would assume that Notre Dame could get in the win column and keep moving on about their year. This is not a Purdue team that's going to hand you a lot of stuff. And Ryan Walters in his second year seems to be a lot more comfortable in this offense. It seems like Hudson Card is a lot more comfortable calling this offense from the line. So there's a lot of different things going in Purdue's direction, but I think Notre Dame can win. I think this one's going to be downright gross, if I'm being totally honest with you. I think this one's going to be a little bit, chippy at times, a little bit run heavy for sure, but I do think Notre Dame gets it done. I just think this one is really, really tough for them, and one of those that if it goes the wrong direction, their season falls off a cliff very, very quickly. West Virginia going over to Pitt is a very interesting one. This line opened at minus 5.5 towards West Virginia's direction, so a lot of people going Pitt's direction after that incredible win over Cincy. I tend to believe they're a little bit overreacting, if I'm being honest. I do like Eli Holstein, the Bama quarterback, came off a really great performance a week ago. Kanata Mumfield is someone to watch in this game, really talented wide receiver, and is going to be a tough cover for just about anyone in the country. But this is one of those games that I think West Virginia is still a really good team. I think they played not so great football in week 1 against Penn State, but I think they're one of those teams that is going to find themselves throughout the year, and I think this is one of those games where a lot of people are overreacting to the week that just happened, and I think West Virginia is going to respond and get a big-time win here, if I had to imagine. But going to be a tough fight, very fun to watch, but I'm going to lean West Virginia in this one. Indiana going over to UCLA is the first weird Big Ten matchup. We get Indiana heading all the way down to LA to play a game, and it's going to be just fascinating to watch this unfold because we're going to see it a ton of times throughout the year and throughout the next couple of years with UCLA and USC, and it's one of those games that you look at it on paper, Indiana has the better team. They have so many different things going for them in this game, and I think UCLA is coming off a bye week, actually, where they had, because they had a very ugly week 1 win against Hawaii. But overall, I think this is an Indiana team that is going to be ready to go. I think Curtis Rourke is a very solid quarterback for them. And Elijah Surratt, or as he calls himself, Waffle House, because he's open 24/7, I think this is going to be a really fun team throughout the year. I think Indiana kind of rolls in this one, if I'm being honest. I don't love this UCLA team, and I think they still have tons to figure out before they can really get rolling. Colorado State is one that everyone is going to be locked into. A super fun game, and one of those that I just cannot wait to see unfold because it's going to get heated. I can absolutely promise you that. When you look around the country, you find all of the teams that just outright hate each other. This is one of the ones on the short list because we saw what happened a year ago. They do not like each other. Torrey Horton and Braden Fowler Nicolosi were talking a little trash earlier on this week about how they should have killed Colorado last year. Did not happen. So it's going to be a very, very fun game in Fort Collins this upcoming weekend. Colorado obviously has struggled through a couple of weeks, has not looked as clean as you want, but Colorado State has not looked very clean, and Torrey Horton is kind of nursing a little bit of an injury. If he's not ready to go, then it's going to be very interesting to watch this one unfold. This is absolutely has to go Colorado's direction. I talked about it yesterday, but this is where we learn just so much about what Colorado is under Deion Sanders, and I think they got to get it done. I do like them in this one. I think Colorado State is a little bit more clunky than people have kind of want to believe going into this game. Obviously, a lot of Colorado haters in particular, but overall, I think this is one of those games that Colorado's just got to be able to handle business. They're going to be able to score. I can almost promise you that. But it's going to be really fun to watch this one. I'm going to lean Colorado, but definitely going to be locked into this one at 7:30 on Saturday. And then finally, UCF going to TCU. This is a really fun game. UCF heading over to Fort Worth for their first Big 12 game of the year, and this one's going to get really interesting. This line has bounced kind of all over the place, but it stayed within 1 point pretty much the entire time. So this is going to be a very, very fun game. I think it's going to be a little bit back and forth. UCF has obviously been eating on the ground with that running back duo and KJ Jefferson, but have missed the mark through the air, as KJ Jefferson has done in the past. So it's one of those things where they're likely going to have to find a pass game throughout this conference play if they're really going to want to make some noise, and it's going to have to start on Saturday likely. I think TCU is cruising right along. They're playing really solid football, and I think Josh Hoover is a lot more comfortable in this offense in year two. I think Cam Cook as well is a lot more comfortable. So I think TCU gets this one. I think it's going to be really, really fun, really close game, but overall I do like TCU to steal that one in Fort Worth. But a lot of really fun games this upcoming weekend. I think there's a number that I haven't even touched on that probably will be the game of the week because I don't think I touched on Northern Illinois Notre Dame going into last week. So it's going to be really fun to watch this one unfold. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to get into my best bets for the week. We've gotten through all of the games. Let's get into what I think is going to happen, and went 5-3 last week, so hopefully we can keep that rolling this week. So we'll do that right after this, so stick with us.